Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 337 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to work on the setup that's going to build us blue circuits. Enjoy. Okay, that was quick research. Let's plan it out. If it's similar enough to how we did green circuits, we might want to repeat what we did, but at the same time, since our equipment is so much better, it might be better just to do a new thing. So, we need electronic processing board, which is going to require a bunch of everything. And I'm pretty sure we were making 30 a second. Oh no, that's actually only 10. And that one was 20. So there must have been some limiting factor where we only decided to do 10. But 10 doesn't seem like very much. Let's see what 30 would actually look like, and then if it's crazy, we'll back it down. Well, we'll put the productivities in there, and that setup is fairly large. 225. But what did we use here? 171. So it's not really going to be that much bigger. But at the same time, I'm not sure if there's really any point to making more circuit boards than the different types. So I kind of don't want to go nuts with it. But nonetheless, we'll just see what everything else looks like first. We'll need the circuit boards, which can also get their productivities. That's 90, which is less than we did it before. And the fiberglass boards would already be delivered. So this would just need plate choppers, all of which basically only require one machine, so that's pretty straightforward. And then we have all of the bits that have to go in, and back in the day that might have been limited on throughput, but now since all of this is below the speed of one belt, it actually won't be that difficult to do. It'll just be kind of annoying having to make all the setups one more time, unless we find something to copy. So let's come back. Make the CPUs with the productivities, and then it needs wire and silicon, and that's basically it for the setup. It's relatively small, so although the final step of this, actually assembling the circuits, takes a lot of work, the supporting components are a lot smaller. I'm thinking we might want to crank it up, especially when we look at the processing boards. They actually do go into quite a few things at the end of the day. I mean, a lot of it is stuff we don't necessarily need in large quantities, but when it comes to launching the rockets, though, we do basically need a whole bunch of them, and we don't need the previous tiers, which means that specifically, we'd really want to crank up the blue circuits. So, it seems like it makes a lot of sense to make these at least at 30 a second, since that's kind of our current bus speed. Going any bigger than this, I'm not so sure. I think we should keep it like it is. So the integrated electronics now. And that's down to its base resources. So we just keep coming back, taking everything down to the resources that are in our logistics network. And then silver wire. And you can kind of see how having all of those wires on coils makes things like circuits so much easier, because now you don't have to make the copper wire and then turn it into silver wire. You can just straight up turn the silver wire from coils to wire form and then put it where it needs to go. So that's good. Finally, down to the basic components, productivities, and more wire coils. And then when we back it out, we're basically good, because we have all base level resources and we're handling everything. So making the boards will be big. Making the first part of the board would be big-ish at 90. The real big one would be putting all the components together, but then the supporting sections will be quite small. So I'm thinking these are good numbers to go with. And now let's look at what we have done previously and if it's something we can reuse. Well, with the green circuits, we have the fiberglass that goes in and then two resources as an input. And we can't use an extra belt on the end because we only have two spaces for inserters, so it kind of has to be this way unless we do something real crazy. But the good news is if you look at the way to make the blue boards, it also requires two metals, the fiberglass board, and then the same ferric chloride solution. So it means that the setup is essentially going to be pretty much the same as this. We'll just have to change it as appropriate for all of our higher level technology. Because it's so similar, we can pretty much copy everything, even the plate choppers to an extent. So since nothing in particular really changes, let's just pick up the whole thing that we need to copy because we only need one of the plate choppers of each type instead of two. So we need it to right around here. Probably have some things we're going to need to move. But for now, let's try to line it up. So something like this. And then exactly what are we dealing with? 122, and we'd actually only need to have 90. And a lot of what we'd have would be better than what's in here, but it probably wouldn't affect anything. Like, for example, we have the better substations with the much longer reach. In the end, it doesn't really matter. We can probably reuse pretty much the same thing. So we would want a total of 90 of them, which we do get if we come down to here. So if we chop it off starting right here, we can clean it up. And the robots are quickly placing things. But let's fix these machines. It seems like they're the red ones, so we'll switch from red to purple. Just so they stop placing things they don't need to. And purple here as well. And oh yeah, they're delivering all those pipes, but those aren't the main pipes we use anymore. We use nitinol. And as long as the reach is on this substation, it's not quite enough, so we have to extend it down. We need to change this over. Well, one of them is copper, which it needs to stay at. The other one can switch over to gold with full productivities in each. Input can be a yellow, output kinda needs to be a purple. Then let's use module inserter to fix these, and it looks like we already have it configured. So now we can max out on productivities. Our technology is a lot better than when we built this before. And let's swap it over finally to blue. Let's see, it can't find a train. Because it is trying to get loaded, but nothing is getting loaded. There must be some part of that that isn't configured right. That was a situation where it was requesting basically 2 battery trains, and the one of them was preoccupied. But it will be preoccupied if it's not getting loaded with anything. So why isn't this flowing? The request is going through. I did the recipe for silver zinc battery right here. Gotta be very, very careful about that. That's not the first time that I've done that. It can be very hard to tell the difference. And it was only on that one. And so that busted the logic. But now, the request of the train is below. The amount of delivered batteries is on top. And the current status of the warehouse is on the left here. The train is asking for 17,000, and it's going to get exactly 17,000, even though more is available, because that is what it requested, because at the time when it came here, the batteries were not available. And we're just about at the request. It reaches it, so it stops delivery. I guess we'll write it. It waits for the inserters to stop. And now we're good. And here we are. I would like to start making the accumulators, but also I kind of want to finish with what we were working on, at least the multi-layer circuit board part. With all this stuff running, we're probably consuming quite a bit of power now. And we are. 2.6 gigawatts. Some of that is accumulator, but 2 gigawatts of that is factory. So, and it's even in the middle of the daytime. And it's having trouble keeping up. And yeah, there's the whine again, but the train is just getting back there. And then once it is, it'll be able to fulfill the next request. Okay, well, we've got the setup here. Now it's just a question of essentially hooking it up the same way the other one was, where the 2 coils go in there, and then the output is on the left, and then the input boards is on the right. The gold isn't something that we've made a request yet for, and we've got one more slot to do it with. Oh, interesting, there's some brass chests in there. I'm not exactly sure how they got in there, but luckily because of the filters, they never got sucked out. Okay, we'll do our gold, negative 512. And let's check to make sure it's capable of fulfilling this request. Unfortunately, not quite, because of all of the remaining gold that's in this warehouse here. So we have a couple of different ways of going about this. Probably the easiest way is to just let robots handle this. So because we're going to use coils on this bus, it doesn't make much sense to put the plates on. However, we can just put them on the belt directly. So since we're here, we can just kind of hook up the copper and see it delivered. Because what we can also do is do a long-handed inserter here with a requester chest asking for all of the gold plates. And it is actually getting them. I'm not terribly sure where it's going to get them from. In a way, though, it doesn't really matter where it ends up getting them from as long as it gets them. But since gold plates are here, probably if we follow it down, we'll figure out where they came from. Well, not really. I'm actually very curious where this gold is going to come from. Well, I didn't see, but here they are. Was it the science bus? Probably. Ah, yes, right here. We did have a buffer chest, and strangely enough, it's a buffer chest with no inserter, so it was incapable of putting its resources in here. But whatever, we can just mark it for deconstruction, and the resources we'll get here. Probably should be nice to the robots and give them more parking spaces than they have available to them. Because for a while, there's going to be a bunch of robots coming in here. And we can let this run for a while, and then if it runs out, we'll have to find more places. Here, let's just pick this up. There we go. We'll have to find more places to get gold from until we've cleared out the factory of its gold plates, and then we can switch over to the coils. But for now, this is probably the best solution for this. So we're getting gold everywhere. Let's make sure the yellow belt is fine for this. Oh yeah, these machines are actually quite slow. But quite efficient when you can mash that many productivity modules in there. We've got the ferric chloride we need in here. That fills up. And now we just need the fiberglass boards, which will be distributed from this part. It's a lot nicer building this using the existing setup and not having to do a bunch of new stuff. So I appreciate that the quantity of input resources didn't really change with this, so we didn't have to go nuts building something. It's nice when things work out every once in a while. But there we go. We're starting to get the blue boards, at least the first tier of them. And we might as well connect them and let them go. And this whole thing doesn't really use that much gold, so it might actually take a while to go through our factory's amount, but at the same time, I kind of want to get gold at least set up properly, where the request was made, and it's parked, and everything's good. So, we'll let the other buses that have the gold plates continue to keep them until eventually they clog. And hey, look at that. Below 10K for oil residuals. I will be very eager to remove that repository warehouse now that we have finally gotten rid of all of that junk that has been essentially plaguing us for basically the entire playthrough. Pretty much since around episode 50 or so, we've been overloaded on residuals. And this is going quite slowly, so why is that? Surprisingly enough, no oxygen. Is this setup going at full blast? No, it's just full on nitrogen, which I suppose makes sense. So the factory just can't quite get rid of the nitrogen. It's just a throughput issue. And I'm guessing that these setups probably make a ton of nitrogen. Yeah, basically more than one pipe would ever hold. So there's almost no point in even trying to save all of it. I mean, we will try to save a little bit, but when it gets extreme like this, all the nitrogen's getting dumped anyway because we're at 60K, so whether it gets dumped here or elsewhere, it doesn't really matter. And we could have a complicated circuit condition that controls these flare stacks based on the status of the nitrogen all the way on the other side of the factory, but I don't think that matters. I'm thinking just a straight up flare stack with an overflow valve here will probably serve us just fine. And let's put it right there, stack it with speeds, and see what we get. Well, how fast can that one put out? Only 600. And if we have much more than that, then that means we're going to need 3 of them. Let's see what this does. Oh yeah, we're green now. Building up oxygen quite readily. Zinc is powered up again. And doing pretty good. It should be about 2 full belts. And it looks like it's basically getting there. Looks like we didn't put any lights in here. But it's basically where it needs to. It just kind of needs to settle down a little bit. Yep, it's asking for the sheet coils now for gold. So I'm thinking the way that we can fix this is basically just pick up all the gold. And it'll instantly go to our junk inventory, and then robots can deal with it. And if it makes its way into the junk warehouse, that's perfectly fine because that requester chest will eventually get them. And inventory full. So perhaps we should have some provider chests here. Just dump everything in there. There we go. Actually, let's make these active providers just to push everything out as quickly as possible. Because, yeah, now it's going into the junk warehouse because that other one's filled up and running the reactor. So this must have bursted a little bit. Yeah, because the level got down. That's what happens when it lowers. So looking pretty good. It's nice and uneventful. The fuel box setup is trying its darndest to keep the factory charged up. But just the ratio of heat sources in addition to the length of these heat pipes is just not sufficient. So we will have to upgrade that. But it's grinding away on fuel blocks, doing the best it can, so all is well. There they are, picking up all of that junk. Okay then, well now that this is clear, we can start pumping the gold coils into the network. And they won't have an immediate use until we've gotten rid of all these plates, but at least LTN will make the request and we'll stop complaining about it. Well, now that our batteries have arrived, we can start working on the accumulators. And to make the high capacity ones, just requires one of the previous accumulators and more parts, and the recipe is very similar. So is it in a place where we can direct insert it? It looks like it is, and I was thinking about that ahead of time. So it's designed in such a way where we can easily do that. So we'll pull the batteries in. And the number of entities that need fixing is now below 600, so it seems like the bots are catching up, upgrading everything. It's essentially going to be pretty much exactly the same thing. So we'll just copy it as such. But we don't need the robot zone. Let's see, does that make a big hole? Nope, the better robot zones cover that now, which is the advantage of upgrading all of them. So we'll do this, and while we're here we can upgrade the machines. Yeah, trying to be at least 50, but we probably want all of these to be more or less the same, and we've got previous batteries from when we upgraded the factory before, so we're going to have lots of batteries to excess in order to fully get everything covered. But let's get that set to the better ones, and they're starting to move. But now we need titanium plates in here, and technically we would need choppers, but our factory isn't quite set up that way because we didn't have coils at the time. So what this means is we can actually remove the choppers from this, because it's unlikely we're going to retrofit the whole bus to use coils natively, that instead we're going to put the coils in the beginning right here and then just chop them up into plates to go on the bus, just because retrofitting every single setup to have plate choppers would be super annoying. So the way we did it before was circuits went on this side, and then this is also kind of in the way. Let's see if we can pull it out, at least that part. Is there a hole? Nope. Awesome. Because then that can go in. And finally, we need a whole bunch of batteries. Okay, let's see it work. Of course, we also need the actual modules, though. There we go. It seems to have no trouble keeping up. Although it is kind of slowing down on the batteries. That could just be because of faster machines, so let's upgrade the technology here to purple. Well, we're kind of at the point of now upgrading all of our accumulators. I'm not sure what our ultimate goal should be. I do have a small dream, though. It would be pretty awesome if we could have a terajoule of accumulator charge. That would be neat. So I'm thinking maybe we can try to double our capacity, which will be a combination of upgrading the existing accumulators and then adding more. Well, when we specifically replace the one that has the signal wire on it, which is this one, it's going to mess everything up, at least for a little while, but eventually it will equalize. But let's get started. I'm not sure exactly how much we'd want to upgrade, but it's not like our factory is super sensitive to accumulators, so let's grab all of this and try not to replace any pipes. But yeah, 12 cave accumulators. No big deal. And now the robots arrive. Luckily, it has a bunch of the old ones first that it needs to go through. And it might be a little slow when it's kind of not entirely balanced between all of these chests, but it will balance out eventually. So that's good. Let's go back to our blue circuits. Oh wow, would you look at that? We are out of salt and we are out of sodium hydroxide. We're actually out of salt. Would you look at that? Never thought I'd see the day. We're actually completely out of saline water too, which is interesting, but I guess that makes sense because we are using salt to actually generate saline water. Well, this is running, trying its best to keep the sodium hydroxide up. Not sure if it's going to cause a major issue being out of saline water like that. Probably not. We certainly could generate a bunch with these setups right here if we really wanted to. But I'm kind of curious to see what the factory does if we don't touch anything, because it is building up a big buffer. And once we're done with these accumulators, we'll have way less of it to deal with. Oh yeah, we never actually put a name on this. Main bus unload 4. There we go. Sorry, whoever you are, but your name is gone now. Okay. Well, this is ready, so we can get rid of that. Now the question is, how do we want to handle the circuits themselves? Because I'm thinking we might be able to do something similar to this and just pick the whole thing up and move it, and then on the very end, add the CPUs. I guess it depends on what goes in and what goes out, and we totally could because one of these belts has only one item. So it could be made to work. But one question is scale. We have 171 and we would need 225. So we would have to extend pretty much down to here, which it basically could. Or we could just call it a day and extend it down as far as it would go. But when you look at this mess of belts here, I kind of would like to reuse it instead of making something new, because it's basically the same thing, but we're only adding CPUs. So if we look at the integrated electronics, we would need 24 machines, and there's actually 24 machines here already, because I guess we upgraded them in the past, but that gives you an idea that many of these things are perfectly sized already for that, so we could reuse it. And then with these components, I guess they're being made on the other side, we would need, wow, only 8 machines. So clearly, what we've got going there would work. And then the tier 1 components, we would only need 2, and we've got a lot more. So it should work. Then when we look at the machines and their assembly, here's the first 3 components and solder, which covers these items here. And then the base circuit boards are being added, but they're just taking up the entire belt. So instead of just the circuits, we could also put the CPUs on there. That'll be the input, and then the output belt is just solid circuits. So that's quite cool. It looks like we can reuse the thing. It's just a question of scale and getting it set up. But we're going to have a little bit of work in front of us to do that. It's just a lot less work than if it was made from scratch. And I remember it took a long time to build this, so I would rather try to reuse it if at all possible. So I guess we'll just kind of hit this and then have fun cleaning it up. I think that does it. Now what does it look like? Well, almost. Stragglers in here still. Well, we probably don't need this stuff either. So we can grab that. We'll figure out the robot zones later if it even matters. But there we go. There are some storage boxes in there for getting rid of junk. So we actually probably don't need to deal with any of that. I imagine it'll work just fine without them. But, oh yeah, we don't need to make these wires either, because clearly we already have a setup doing that. So yeah, I think we're good. Oh wow, it quite lags the computer. Let's get rid of these zones here. Does it matter? No, it looks like we can successfully get rid of them, that there is enough overlap. And it looks like all of the zone expanders have been placed. Now they're just working on accumulators. Okay, we want to try to line this up if we can. It's a lot to look at. So we'll give it 2 spaces here. Line it up with that hazard concrete. And I think we're basically good, but we got a bunch of stuff overlapping down here. So actually, let's just pick up all of it, and then we'll fix it. So just like that. Quite the lag to get it to place. And we do actually have an empty zone right there. Alright, well there's a lot going on here. Let's replace all of the relevant stuff. Most of the wires are probably good where they're at, but we do need the better machines. So let's see. Let's get all this fixed. Uh-oh. Still having a problem on this corner. Guess we could always just add more wall. Just specifically right there. It's a lot of inserters in a small space here. Well, let's handle each part of the setup. First, we definitely want all of the modules in here. And specifically, we need either 225 or as close to 225 as we can get without doing anything too crazy. They're still breaking stuff. I mean, the wall's there, but they're shooting things. That is nuts. All of the repair packs in the factory are right here. So this is clearly the part that is getting trashed. Okay, well this reaches down to here with no overlap, so that's basically as far as we can take it. I don't think there's any nears or fars or anything on this setup. It's just a straight copy of itself. So if we mashed absolutely everything in there, this is what we'd get. And what does that equal? 225 exactly. Well, that was lucky. But it's so close that we need to make sure that none of these belts are going to cross over. So let's just turn these final belts to make sure nothing crosses over. So most of this is lined up. As far as the belts are concerned, the only thing that's going to be different is specifically this balancer right here. We need to make sure it's half and half. So the one in question is here. Let's do something like that to remind us that it's half and half. And that's that. Let's take a look at the other setups now that they're built. We needed 24 here, and we have 24. The number is 48 per second, but the yellow inserters are fine, and it is being upgraded to blue. But it's actually kind of a problem because this point right here, it's going to be overloaded. So in order to do this properly, we need to split the belt first before it combines here. And actually these belts aren't even necessary because those were the bypass belts for our robot brains, which we don't even need. And then that should give us 2 of exactly the same thing. I kind of want to cut that off there to make sure. And then the extra belt can kind of go up there. And that should avoid the throughput limitations, but we'll have to see. But anyway, we have 24 machines, and that's what we needed. Let's see, no gold coils. Why is that? What else are we short on now? We have no hydrochloric acid, which makes sense because we need salt to do that. So that was interesting, where we've gone from way too much salt to, oh my god, there's no salt. But we need to have some kind of backup for that process. And what's the best way to do this? Well, probably just chucking in actual salt into the system. So how do we make it? Saline water is of course much better, but regular water is the grindy way of doing it. So we'd probably just want to make it from nothing here. Let's check out to see what kind of numbers we'd need. I don't know, let's just see 30. That's actually not that bad, especially because there's no speed modules in there. So when you put speed modules in, it's a lot better. So how about we'll just straight up do 60? Because we'll only need 5 machines. We'll need an enormous amount of water. Basically, a single offshore pump for every single one. But that's actually not that big a deal, because we are next to water here. And there is a little space right here, so why not use it? Put it down a little bit so there's room for every pump we're going to need. And then we'll just send this belt in. Well, we can kind of get rid of this mess, because now we have the better loaders. So it should always go in if it's available by drone, because it means it was overloaded somewhere. But this new method should probably only turn on to keep it minimally full. So how about salt below 10,000? And with that, we should be pretty good to test this out. It's kind of amazing this is all it takes. But our equipment is pretty high tier now, so it doesn't take much. So that should give us about 60, and it looks like the stack inserters are doing a pretty good job of keeping that belt smooth. Uh-oh, short circuit. Well, that's a short circuit with this right here. So we would solve that by doing this. That's an error when it comes to these transformers. Don't really use them for much, but that's what that's from. But the salt's going in. It's running both sides, and they're kind of fighting. And what is this filling up to? 40k? Actually, you could probably just do 10k and get rid of the doubles on here. And this one is trying to also do 10, but let's downgrade that to 5. And then, as this thing is going, let's give it another circuit condition, this time on the input inserters for the warehouse, and say there needs to be a minimum amount of salt in there, like 10,000, before they're allowed to turn on. That way, this hydrochloric acid will get its opportunity to turn on, and it seems like it's now filling up. So this thing continues to run. It gets to 1,000, and now they're basically going. It's a little janky, because they kind of fight half the time, but it seems to be working. The tank has 0 in it, but it's got a pressure pump, and soon hydrochloric acid will be maxed out, and then it can start running again. So we should be seeing gold flow again, and it isn't. Is that because we ran out of ingots? Yeah. Okay, so we need to change this setting right here, because it takes gold to make gold. So they're not going in. By using the anything, it made it so since nothing is in there, they won't turn on. This one should be an anything, because we definitely want it false if it's empty. Not that it really matters, but these should probably be everythings. So it takes gold to make gold. Now it's going in. Process is starting up again. And the warehouse is trying to fill up. And there it did. Now it's metering out as appropriate. So that should be a disaster averted. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to start making our blue circuits, as well as deal with some other random stuff, like brownouts and UPS limits. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.